people, CEOs and people on Wall Street and on Main Street should bet on this president.
We're working to make sure that every Democrat votes no and is here and present on the floor.
We made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Great to have you with us. Tonight on America Decides, ceasefire agreement. Ukraine says it is ready to accept a 30-day pause in fighting with Russia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who you just heard, will now take this deal, which in no small measure resumes U.S. intelligence sharing with Kyiv. That's a big deal to the Russians. The big question there, will Moscow accept it? Market uncertainty. The Dow closes down again due to recession fears, among other things, shedding 478 points. The NASDAQ and S&P both ended the day down as well, though not as sharply as the Dow Jones. President Trump's on again, off again tariff wars with our biggest trading partner, Canada, is in part fueling this market anxiety. Ontario's premier said today he will temporarily suspend a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to 3 U.S. states, and, importantly, will meet with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in an attempt to resolve ongoing differences. President Trump earlier today had previously threatened new tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum in response. I want to start tonight with Jennifer Jacobs in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Jennifer staying up late, a local time there. She's been at work all day today. It was a long day of negotiations. Sum up what we learned, Jennifer.
Well, what we learned is that President Trump had put in a demand that the fighting completely stop, and the Ukrainians went along with it. I'm told that President Trump was not part of these discussions today here in Jeddah. He didn't telephone in or join by teleconference, but I'm told that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz did call him about midway through these negotiations, which lasted nearly 9 hours, and checked in with him. And that's how they proceeded. I'm also told that the Saudi hosts here actually kind of helped make this deal a little bit easier. The facilitating, the way they managed logistics and the hospitality really helped. I was told they only took 2 breaks. Otherwise, there was a lot of intensive negotiations today, Major.
And Jennifer, you'll just have to tell your emailers to wait. You're on live television. We'll deal with those emails that are incoming and making the binging sound momentarily. I want to play for you the sound from Secretary of State Rubio announcing this deal. Let's run that.
We'll take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Jennifer, what is the level of optimism among the president's team there in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, that the Russians will, in fact, take this up and reciprocate positively?
They were hopeful, but there are no guarantees, Major. It's not clear yet, I'm told, whether the Russians will think that diplomacy is in their best interest for gaining what they want to gain, or if they're going to think that fighting is going to be their best way. Marco Rubio said the ball is in their court. All they can do is hope. I do know that they're taking this through multiple channels to the Russians. There's a named delegation both on the Ukrainian side and on the Russian side that are going to sit down and really hash through every detail of this deal. There's multiple diplomatic channels that they're going through, and also Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is going to be going to Moscow, I'm told, and he will meet with President Putin. So that's key. So there will be direct conversations, indirect conversations, and all they told me today is that they're very hopeful that the Russians will accept this.
Jennifer Jacobs joining us after a very long day of reporting in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Now you can get back to your emails. Jennifer, thank you very, very much. Finn Gomez and Alex Eisenstadt joins me now here at the desk. Finn, of course, is our CBS News political director. Alex, I'm happy to say, senior political reporter for Axios, also the author of a soon-to-be-released, next week, new book called Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. Alex and Finn, it's good to have you with us. I want to play for both of you sound from the president just this afternoon on the South Lawn with a bunch of Tesla cars. We'll get to that in a second, talking about this ceasefire. Let's listen.
I think it's a big difference between the last visit you saw at the Oval Office and this. So that's a total ceasefire. Ukraine has agreed to it, and hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to wipe out a deal. But I think the ceasefire is very important. If we can get Russia to do it, that'll be great. If we can't, we just keep going on and people are going to get killed, lots of people.
Alex, if we can get Russia to do it, sounds like a very large if.
Yeah, it's a big if. And Russia at this point feels like, or it has to feel like it's got a White House that's much more aligned with it than the Biden White House. And so the question is does Russia go along with this? And if they do go along with it, what are their demands? And do those demands, are they okay with the Ukrainians? So it feels like there's a long way to go here.
Your book analyzes a lot of then candidate Trump, now President again, Trump's approach to pushing things forward. We had the blow up in the Oval Office. Now we have this, basically the Ukrainians coming right back into the White House fold. What does that tell you about Trump's methodology?
So much of what Trump likes to do is about leverage, and he sees everything in terms of negotiation. One of the interesting things is, and Jennifer mentioned this, is Steve Witkoff is Trump's special envoy. He's going to be going to Russia now. Trump has had this decades-long relationship with Steve Witkoff. This is something I talk about in the book, because in part because he sees Witkoff as a master negotiator. He's a fellow New York real estate guy. So much of what Trump does is about leverage and about how he sees negotiation.
And Witkoff speaks Trump.
Witkoff speaks Trump. He's someone that Trump trusts. You know, Steve Witkoff was actually one of the very few friends who didn't dispatch of Trump after January 6th. So their relationship, their relationship is very close. And so it's notable that he's the one who's going to Russia here.
Finn, I want to play for you something that our colleague Nancy Cordes, in a sit-down interview with Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, discussing this other topic today, Canada, back and forth. Will the tariffs go higher? Will they not? Will electricity be done this way or that way? Let's listen to Nancy Cordes and the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick.
That's off too. So we're at 25% steel and aluminum, because that's where we were.
What is really being accomplished with all of these 1 or 2 day tariffs that end up getting yanked?
Well, when you're negotiating with someone and they're not paying attention and they're disagreeing, the president, who's the best deal maker ever to sit in that chair, is going to say, here's my response. And then all of a sudden, shockingly, they respond. So that's what he has to do. He has to do what he thinks is important to get the right deal for America.
And for those in the audience not hovering over every announcement from the president, there was a social media post earlier today. Tariffs on steel and aluminum will go up another 25 to 50%. Then there was this call, and Lutnick got in touch with the Canadians, and now maybe it's all simmered back down. Your take on all this, Finn?
Yeah, and according to the president, it has gone back down. It was going to be at 50%. Now it's gone back down. And there's been, you've seen this seesaw, this tit for tat over social media, and Barb's traded over different interviews. Ed O'Keefe had a great interview with the Premier Ford in Ontario this past week. To me, I spoke to someone close to President Trump, an advisor to him, an outside advisor, just a little while ago, who told me that the tariffs. This is something he truly and genuinely believes in. Yes, it's leverage. Yes, it's a tactic at times, but this is something at heart that he's been talking about for decades, and he truly, truly believes in. And again, he necessarily doesn't have that counterpoint that he did in the first administration, who says maybe this is not a good idea.
Inside the building.
Inside the building,
trying to slow the roll a little
bit.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
Alex, I know what Finn said is true. You know it's true. And yet, the president and Caroline Leavitt today talk about Canada ripping us off.
Yeah.
Under what auspices? Trump negotiated the existing U.S., Canada, Mexico free trade agreement. I was in the Rose Garden when he extolled it as the fairest, best, most equitable trade deal ever.
Right. Well, so much of Trump's campaign was about making promises to bring back the manufacturing industry, and he feels a lot of pressure to come into the White House and follow up and make good on those promises. The issue now is, what does it do to the markets? And Trump is a guy who's always cared about the stock market. He's always talked about the stock market. So is that a countervailing pressure on him that makes him walk back some of this stuff? And also, he's also ingratiated himself with a lot of major donors, which is something that he didn't have during his first term. So now if you have financiers in his ear, is that a countervailing pressure? And they're telling him, hey, you might want to scale some of this stuff back. Right.
And the White House said today, we're in a transition period. How long that transition will be, what effect it will have on people's mutual funds, 401ks, to be determined. Finn Gomez, Alex Eisenstadt, thank you. I'm happy to say Alex is sticking around. He'll be back a little bit later in this hour for more on his book, Revenge. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says, you heard him, The ball is in Russia's court. What happens next as the U.S. works to broker a deal to end the war in Ukraine? More on that next, right here on America Decides.
The Ukrainian delegation today made something very clear, that they share President Trump's vision for peace.
That was National Security Advisor Mike Waltz speaking after talks wrapped up with the Ukrainians in Saudi Arabia. The Trump administration now says, of course, you just heard it, that Ukraine wants peace. For weeks, they said just the opposite. Editor-in-Chief of Foreign Policy, Ravi Agrawal, joins me now. He's a friend of this program, and I'm happy that's true. Ravi, are you surprised at the developments today with this announced ceasefire, and what do you think it tells us now about whatever distance there was before with the Trump White House and Ukrainian President Zelensky?
I'm not entirely surprised. I see it as a good sign that talks are taking place. Ultimately, everyone wants peace, or at least most people do, and this is a step in the right direction. There is a problem, however. The assumption on the American side, this American side, under the Trump administration, is that the Russians will act in good faith. And the problem is that there's a real difference in perceptions about trust. President Trump has made very clear that he trusts Putin, Russia's Putin. So in other words, were they to make a deal, he seems to think that Putin would stand by a deal and that security guarantees would not be necessary because he trusts Putin. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, have every reason to not trust the Russians. And so they would insist on security guarantees and a future that would, for them, make sure that the Russians wouldn't be aggressive again. There's another wrinkle here. The Europeans who've been meeting in Paris amid all of this also do not trust the United States any longer. So any guarantees that the United States would broker, the Europeans will rightly ask, well, what good is your word when you've quite openly been questioning the value of NATO and saying you might pull out? So even though it is a good step that all of these talks are taking place, there's a real mismatch in terms of trust. Different sides don't trust each other. And it comes down to that one question again and again, security guarantees. Who will put up the forces needed to ensure that Ukraine's future is secure?
Ravi, two questions. How meaningful is it to you that the president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is going to go to Moscow to talk possibly with Putin or certainly those in his inner circle about all this? Question one. Question two, what if the Russians don't abide by this, continue to bomb, shoot missiles into Ukraine? What options left are available to the Trump White House?
Yeah, these are great questions. And this is why it is so devilishly difficult to end a war that has now been going on for 3 years. So it is a good sign that Witkoff is going to Moscow and will speak to the Russians and present, everything that was agreed in Jeddah and ask if the Russians similarly want to make a display that they want peace, just as the Ukrainians just have. But what does that mean? What does it entail? How is Russia going to guarantee that it's not going to go back on its word? And what actual forces will the West put up to ensure that is the case? So that remains the devilish question that no one really has any answers to unless you are willing to put up, And then to your other question, all of this is headed in a very strange direction because, again, it brings us back to square one. Unless all sides agree that any deal that is agreed upon is enforceable and that you can't act with impunity afterwards, so much trust is now broken down on all sides. It's very difficult to see how you come back from there. That is going to be Ukraine's challenge, to keep putting forward an idea for security guarantees. The Europeans are key here, but the problem there is that everything they are doing right now to try and build up their defense capabilities, their industrial base that supplies their defense capabilities, that takes years to come to fruition. So even though they're saying all the right things, action will take a while. And it really begs the question, what were they doing all this time?
Ravi, before I let you go, one last question. In terms of words, deeds, and optics, does this ceasefire agreement need to be negotiated face-to-face between Trump and Putin and then announced with them jointly signing something to give the Ukrainians and to your other point, the Europeans, a sense that this might actually be binding?
I think there's that, but ultimately, the paper an agreement is written on is only worth the paper. Ultimately, I think the Ukrainians will look for boots on the ground, their own boots on the ground, some European boots on the ground, and then maybe some acknowledgement that, or some guarantee that the United States will back them up in the event of renewed Russian aggression. Without that, you're back to square one. No agreement is worth anything if you don't have security guarantees. And the Ukrainians are going to keep making that point, no matter how much they are pressed to display and say that they want peace. Of course they want peace, but at what cost?
Ravi Agrawal, Foreign Policy. Thank you, sir, as always.
Pleasure.
The race for Wisconsin State Supreme Court. Why groups tied to billionaires like Elon Musk and George Soros are pouring millions into next month's election. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. It's good to have you with us. The People versus Musk. That's the title of a new seven-figure campaign on television led by Wisconsin Democrats, and it involves the state Supreme Court race that has quickly become kind of a spending contest of many ideologically different billionaires. This contest is on April 1st. It is technically nonpartisan. The outcome will determine the court's ideological balance and give the nation an early read on the political terrain after the 2024 presidential election. Now, the ideologically conservative candidate, that's Brad Schimmel, has the backing of at least one political action committee connected to Elon Musk, while the ideologically liberal candidate, that's Susan Crawford, has George Soros's money and money from some other progressive wealthy donors in her corner. Democrats recently released this ad calling out Musk and his federal workforce cuts.
Elon Musk is out of control, and now the power-hungry billionaire is unloading millions to buy the Wisconsin Supreme Court. He knows MAGA politician Brad Schimmel is for sale.
I want to bring in Ben Wickler now, who's chair of Wisconsin's Democratic Party. It's great to have you with us, Ben. So, is this race between Brad Schimmel and Susan Crawford or George Soros and Elon Musk?
Well, unfortunately, Elon Musk has decided to put in more than $10.2 million of his fortune into this race through two big super PACs. That is more than 7 times the amount that we've tracked from any other donor in this race, a vast sum that is unimaginable. But in the Citizens United era, the doors are open for the richest man in the world to try to buy the most powerful court in Wisconsin by putting Brad Schimmel into the tie-breaking seat. With Susan Crawford, she's beholden to no one. She interprets the law, and she's the kind of judge that you'd want on the Supreme Court. So on the Democratic Party and in her campaign, we've actually garnered much more support from small grassroots donors than from any major donor. But the question is whether all of that and all of the door knocking and volunteering that we're doing to ensure folks know that she represented Planned Parenthood in the state Supreme Court case, Planned Parenthood versus Brad Schimmel, to make sure that voters know that she's the person who actually believes in Wisconsin values and the rule of law, and that Brad Schimmel is for sale.
Yeah, but George Soros and Reid Hoffman have given to the state party, and that money appears to have gone straight to her campaign, so they're involved too, right?
We have major donors, we have small donors. At the Democratic Party, what we don't have is, to our knowledge, donors with cases pending in the Wisconsin court system. Elon Musk has sued in Wisconsin courts to try to bypass car dealership laws to sell more Teslas here, and now he's poured in $10 million. How many figures is that? 8 figures into trying to buy the state's highest court. That's just something that is without parallel. And he's doing that at the same time as he attacks Social Security, the Veterans Administration, and tweets on the platform that he owns about supposed voter fraud, which might be something to do with Brad Schimmel talking about how Trump was, in his words, screwed over when the state Supreme Court didn't overturn the 2020 election. That's all a cause for concern for anyone who cares about democracy, whether or not you care about Wisconsin itself.
Ben, what's the state of the race?
This is potentially a tight race. You know, if you go back over the last 15 years, we've had 2 state Supreme Court races that came down to less than half of a percentage point. Now, we've also had some blowout victories. So the real question is whether the intensity of voter engagement is going to be higher among Democrats and people who believe in democracy, or whether it will be higher among the MAGA base that Elon Musk's ads are trying to appeal to. He's putting out flyers that say that Trump needs you to vote for Brad Schimmel. And our message is democracy, freedom, the rule of law, safety in our communities needs you to vote for Susan Crawford. And we'll see which of those messages out-energizes the other.
Which is the analog for this race? Kamala Harris, who lost to Donald Trump, or Eric Hovde, who lost to Tammy Baldwin in the Senate race?
Well, I think if you look at Tammy Baldwin, she had tremendous appeal in every corner of Wisconsin because she embodied common sense. She was from Wisconsin through and through. Kamala Harris lived here as a child, but I will say Susan Crawford grew up in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. She was the eldest of 4 siblings. She took care of a sibling with special needs, and that inspired in her this instinct to protect that has carried her through her work as a prosecutor, as an attorney, and now as a judge. And like Tammy Baldwin, she earns trust from people in every corner of this state. On the other side, we have Brad Schimmel, who's a MAGA extremist politician in the mold of Eric Hovde, someone who alienates people through his kind of power grab energy. And he's supported by one of the most disturbing figures in American politics, Elon Musk, who's currently shredding the Veterans Administration. I think this is going to be a Tammy Baldwin plus victory in the state of Wisconsin for Susan Crawford.
And if it isn't, what state will that leave national Democrats who feel still not only dismayed, but a bit disorganized?
I will say this. The fact that the richest man in the world, while he's shredding Social Security and threatening to eliminate programs like Medicaid and Medicare, that he would plunk down a $10 million contribution in a state Supreme Court race to try to control the judicial system, whether or not either side wins, this is a wake-up call. That for anyone who thinks that we shouldn't become an oligarchy where the whole country is run by the world's richest people, they need to get involved, organizing, volunteering. Go to peoplevmusk.org to sign up to volunteer or to donate, to get involved to ensure that people who believe in democracy are at the levers of our democracy. This is an all-hands-on-deck situation. And through Election Day, April 1st, we're going to be doing everything we can to alert Democrats and people who believe in Susan Crawford's vision of Wisconsin to get out and cast a ballot.
Wisconsin Democratic Party Chair Ben Wickler, thank you.
Thanks so much.
President Trump is calling for Kentucky Republican Congressman Thomas Massie to be primaried in the next midterm election. This over his opposition today to a GOP-written government funding bill. Our reporter panel will dig into that next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. Kentucky Republican Congressman Thomas Massie says he will not be supporting a Republican-drafted short-term funding bill to keep the government open until the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. That has President Trump a bit angry. He said that Massie should be primaried because he's not on board. The president even compared Massie, yikes, in Republican circles at least, to Liz Cheney and wrote in part, quote, "He should be primaried, and I will lead the charge against him. He's just another grandstander." I want to bring in our reporter panel, Braxton Booker and Jasmine Wright. Braxton is national political correspondent with Politico. Jasmine, politics reporter for Notice. And remember, Notice, news of the U.S. Mike Johnson somewhat tepidly said today, as Speaker of the House, he's in the incumbent protection business, but it's not like he said Thomas Massie is the most formidable member of my conference and a true loyalist or any of the other things he might extol. He just sort of said, I'd rather not get into this at the moment.
Right. Well, look.
How do you read it?
Look, from folks I've talked to in Kentucky today.
Yeah, please.
Look, I mean, Thomas Massie is a pretty strong candidate, and no one seems to think that there could be a candidate that could be fielded that could really take him out.
Okay, even with a Trump endorsement?
Even with a Trump endorsement. Even Massie himself has said, look, this is nothing new. Mm-hmm. He's done it to me in 2020 when I voted against a COVID-era bill that Trump wanted passed. Did it again in 2022. And look, 3 times in a row, 3 times defeated.
Right.
And a lot of folks think Massie has eyes on the governor's race in 2027. There doesn't seem to be anybody who's actually really afraid of this. They seem to think that Trump is using this to kind of beat back some of the other Republicans that are holdouts.
It's not
right
about
now.
Massie.
Exactly.
It's about other Republicans fearing they could get that wrath, not be nearly as, not indifferent to it, but kind of muscular with a history of defeating it in the past and say, I better stay in line.
Exactly. I think
so it's not about what it looks to be about, it's about something else.
This is a message to other Republicans to get in line because Republicans can only lose 1 vote. And if Massie's that vote, he can't have any other defections.
Right. Jasmine, the big word at the White House today at the briefing was we're in a transition period. Mm-hmm. That is acknowledging, barely, but acknowledging the market downturn, which if you are a middle-class person, the last week, your 401k or your mutual fund has taken a noticeable hit. You have reason to be genuinely anxious, even if you voted for President Trump in the 2024 election. But the White House is saying, hold tight, better days are ahead.
Yeah, they're asking for basically more time.
For
which
grace.
I will tell you is much different than what we heard from Trump on the campaign trail,
So
who
much
basically
different.
said he would make America affordable again and he would bring down inflation on day one.
Trump alone can fix it.
Trump alone can fix it. It is now day 40, 50, I'm not quite sure, but certainly these things have not happened. So they're saying that this is a transitional period. I was in the briefing room today and Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, spelled out the fact that they believe that they're digging themselves out of a hole that Joe Biden and his administration created and that things are not going to happen overnight. Again, a far cry from what Trump said. Now, Caroline was asked a lot of times, basically, how much pain can this White House take? Because we know that the markets are reacting negatively to the threat of these tariffs, to a potential trade war with Mexico, potential trade war with, of course, Canada kind of being the biggest player
and
today.
China responding with its own retaliatory tariffs.
Trump kind of upping the ante, the fears that this pushes us closer to a recession. So she was asked, how much pain can the White House take? And she really didn't answer that. But we know, even though Trump has said it, even as late as today, that he's not watching the stock markets, we know that he is. And we know that this is something that he follows closely. And so I think that that's a very fair question. Of course, they've kind of backed down from putting on the 50% tariffs, as he said he would last night. They backed off of it today. So we'll see how much further that this can go. But Trump is one to watch the numbers, and he's one to react to the numbers. And I think that that is what we as reporters know, and certainly what people inside the administration know, too.
And Braxton, what the president says about his market watching habits is one thing. And we know the market isn't the economy. The economy is many different things.
Sure.
But investors do make bets on the future, and CEOs make anticipatory bets on the environment that they're going to be operating in the next year or so. To the White House's point, there have been some announcements about new investment. Some of them were already in process. Some of them are brand new. But the volatility seems to be real. And a political factor that can't be set aside.
Right. And look, there are also growing fears that there is going to be an onset of recession, which Trump certainly does not want in his first couple of months in office, because he's supposed to be the man who can control and have great powers over the economy, which is proving to not be the case right now. But you will hear other people say that there are benefits of him having these tariff wars, right? Because you see that Canada backed off today from having these surcharges on electricity to some of the most northern states that rely on that. So there seems to be some negotiation tactic that Trump believes he still has and has the leverage to really get a really beneficial outcome for. But it does not seem like it's helping him with the economy here in the U.S.
Or his approval numbers, right?
Or his approval numbers. Talk to us about that, Jasmine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we've seen over the last week or so, as the market has really fluctuated, as the Dow and S&P 500 have kind of gone up and down, is that so has his approval ratings in some of these latest surveys. Because the fact is that even though Trump believes that it was immigration now that was his greatest ally in getting him to the White House, what a lot of Americans voted on, in addition to immigration, was the economy. And was the idea that the economy under Biden was bad, and therefore the economy under a new person like Trump would be good. And so there's a lot riding on it. He knows this, his allies know this, and so I think that they are very focused on not just the stock market, but of course, Trump is focused on those approval numbers as well.
And Braxton, quickly, the consumer confidence has dipped a little bit. The National Federation of Independent Businesses reported for the second month in a row a dip in confidence among small businesses. It hasn't fallen to Biden-level areas of discouragement. That's true. The White House underscored that, but it still fell from where it was in December.
Right.
So small businesses taking a look at their short-term future, a little bit nervous also.
Yeah, but you hear this all the time from strategists. Like businesses can't figure out how to plan. The other thing that I will also say is Democrats also have to be able to take advantage of this, and they have not seemed to really been able to capitalize on some of these bad economic woes that Trump has kind of ushered in, but it remains to be seen if they can really find a way to really
they can't even figure out how they're going to vote on a continuing resolution to keep the government open. Bracken Booker and Jasmine Wright, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to have you here. President Trump's revenge and his history-defying and probably history-setting re-election campaign. Author Alex Eisenstadt is back here at the desk to talk about his new book. That's next, right here on America Decides.
Goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form.
Welcome back. That was President Trump about 4 years ago, and yeah, he came back as kind of a political reincarnation of Grover Cleveland, the only other president elected to a second non-consecutive term, also a New Yorker, but Democrat, different kind of politics, different orientation to the presidency, to be sure. That's where the comparisons basically end. Alex Eisenstadt is back with me here at the table, I'm happy to say, to discuss his new book, Revenge, the inside story of Trump's return to power. It's great to have you with us. Thanks for coming back for a second segment. I want to read from your book, something you know well because you wrote it, about Elon Musk and President Trump. Quote, Musk had cultivated a rabid following, many of them young men who dug his give no Fs, I like to break S, fill in the blanks, ladies and gentlemen, you can do it, go ahead, style through his purchase and prolific use of X, his Tesla leadership, and his status as the richest person on the planet. That fits perfectly with today's video from the White House South Lawn. Show it, control room, please. The president and Elon Musk on the South Lawn as if it had been converted into a small Tesla dealership. President says he's going to buy a Tesla and pay full price for it. Diagram for our audience, Alex, based on your reporting and your book, the relationship between Musk and Trump and its likely durability.
Well, one of the things I write in the book is that Brat Summer became Bro Fall in this campaign, and Trump really cultivated the support not just of Musk, but a broader segment of the bro population. Musk was symbolic of that. And here's one of the interesting things about Musk is that—
Was Musk the key to that bro vote?
He was part of it. He was part of it for sure. It certainly didn't hurt. He was definitely the leader of it, the most prominent figure of it, along with Joe Rogan, who, of course, Musk helped Trump get on Rogan's show. He helped broker that. But here's the thing about Musk, which is Trump respects Musk because he's a fellow billionaire. He respects Musk because he's the richest person on the planet. But here's the thing about Musk, which is that unlike a lot of other cabinet members, Musk doesn't really have to answer to anyone. He answers to Trump to some degree. Nominally, but he's the richest person on the planet. So if this thing doesn't work out for him, if what he's doing with Doge doesn't work out for him, he's just going to go back to Tesla. He's going to go back to X. He's going to go back to having hundreds of billions of dollars.
Is that video from the South Lawn a message to other cabinet secretaries, some of whom got in Musk's face in the cabinet room last week to back off?
Well, here's the thing about Trump. Trump has showed that he respects Musk multiple times in recent weeks. There was that. There was that public cabinet meeting that Trump had in front of cameras where he had Musk speak. You didn't see other cabinet members have that kind of platform. Trump called out Musk at the State of the Union. So Trump has showed a lot of respect to Musk in recent weeks, a lot more than he's shown publicly to other cabinets.
The title of the book is Revenge. Describe to the audience how big a factor, though frequently and perhaps mischievously denied by Trump, was the driving force behind his bid for a second term.
Trump definitely wanted revenge. It was revenge after January 6th. He wanted to show the political class that had rejected him. He wanted to show the Republican Party that had rejected him after January 6th. But it wasn't just revenge for Donald Trump. It was also revenge for Trump supporters. And one of the things I go into in the book was that Trump appealed to a broad segment of the American population, people who had felt rejected by and forgotten about by the political elites in Washington, by the elites in New York, by the elites in Hollywood. And they saw in Trump someone who was a vessel for them, a vessel for their frustrations, someone who had been written, who, like them, had been written off, and someone who was an underdog. And
how much did mugshot magnetism play into this?
It helped Trump. Again, like you look at these things, whether it was January 6th, whether it was the mugshot, whether it was Trump's legal problems, they all became kind of a plus for Trump in the end. Trump supporters saw in him someone who was like them, someone who was under duress, and that became fuel and ammunition for Trump.
Did Trump supporters see him as someone who was being chased and sort of pursued by their same foes,
100%.
their same obstacles to either Happiness in America, satisfaction, a better job, a better education, fill in the blank.
100%. And you talk about these
Whether that's true or not, they saw it that way.
They saw it that way. And whether perception is reality is, that's the question, right?
That's up to each individual voter.
And so the question now is, Trump was great at fighting. He's great at campaigning. The question now is, can he deliver for those voters when he governs? And so he's following through on tariffs. He wanted to bring manufacturing back for those forgotten Americans. And the question is, can he now make their lives better economically? And that's the big question right now.
How important were those who were closest to Trump in trying to run the 2024 campaign differently than 2016 and 2020 were run?
It's a totally different ballgame. Trump's political operation, his operation generally, was better than anything he had in 2016, was better than anything he had in 2020. It was far more functional than the White House he had. And so Trump really benefited from having a campaign that was run by, in many cases, traditional operatives. And those people are now in the White House. And so you're seeing a White House that is much more uniform behind him. You're not seeing infighting the way you had in the first White House. You're seeing a team that's very much unified behind Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, who she had with her in the campaign and who she's now brought with her to the White House.
Alex Eisenstadt, thank you very much. The book, again, called Revenge. The race to succeed Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Well, it's gotten a little bit more crowded. Her Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist joins a growing Democratic primary. My conversation with him is next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Michigan Democratic Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist has officially entered the crowded race to be the state's next governor. I spoke with him yesterday about why, outside of normal human ambition, he wants the job.
I am an engineer by training. I've spent my whole career fixing broken systems and making them work better for people. And in my time as Lieutenant Governor, working alongside Governor Whitmer, I've been to all 83 counties multiple times, and I've learned about what's important to Michiganders, the things they want fixed, the problems they want solved. And I'm a problem solver who can fix it, because I solve problems, don't create them. And in this moment, that's what we need. So I'm running for governor to make Michigan the best place to have an idea, to be, to stay, and succeed.
What's the biggest problem that needs to be solved?
When I talk with Michiganders across those 83 counties, I hear about housing and healthcare, mental health. I've spent my time now as Lieutenant Governor delivering hundreds of millions of dollars and bringing 60,000 new housing units online because of my efforts. And on healthcare and mental health, I've created a program called the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics that have led to 40% increases in capacity for some of our solution providers, so that kids can get the help they need to not have suicidal ideation. Veterans can get the help they need to be supported and know that they're not alone. And overall, we can increase our well-being in Michigan.
So there'll be a Democratic primary. Why are you better for Michigan Democrats than Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson or Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson?
I'm the only candidate in this race who has delivered on results of things that matter to people all across Michigan, whether it is housing and healthcare, like I mentioned, whether it's things like making our economy more diverse and enabling it to grow through things like the Michigan Innovation Fund that I created. I'm a recovering entrepreneur, so I sober major. I've started and sold 2 technology companies. I remember trying to raise money for my tech business in the early 2000s. Well, now the Michigan Innovation Fund will help those founders be able to raise their money in Michigan so they can keep their headquarters in the state of Michigan. No other candidate in this primary have delivered results like that to grow our economy and diversify it.
Lieutenant Governor, as you well know, roughly 45% of a national election vote in Michigan comes from 4 counties: Wayne County, Oakland County, Macomb County, Kent County. In the last election, either by raw vote or percentage, Kamala Harris lost ground in all 4 of those counties. What was her problem? What is the problem with the Democratic Party in swing states?
Well, those certainly are population centers. And in those population centers, you have to get to know people and build those relationships. I've spent significant amounts of times in each one of those counties, because I've spent significant time in every county in Michigan, all 83 of them. And in going there and listening to people, they know that I have their priorities in mind, not my own. So what my focus is going forward is using those relationships to understand what's most important and then solving the problems. I hear about challenges, for example, with things like internet access in the rural parts of Kent County. Well, I've delivered on connecting those folks to the internet. People want to see that Democrats are results-oriented problem solvers, and I'm a results-oriented problem solver as an engineer. So I think people recognizing that we see the change needs to happen, and that we have the capacity and the desire to make it happen. I'm on fire to do that. That's why I want to be the next governor.
What was your assessment, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, of Democrats in the House chamber during President Trump's speech to a joint session last week?
I'll tell you my assessment of the speech, because I did watch it in real time, and I was proud of Senator Slotkin for responding downriver from Wyandotte, Michigan. My assessment was that I saw a lot of chaos and destructive stuff coming toward the state of Michigan. The tariffs are going to set fire to people's paychecks. They're going to set fire to businesses' balance sheets. They're going to set fire to the bottom lines of communities. You know, the cuts to Medicaid that are going to come from that policy agenda would lead to people like my grandma dying 5 years earlier because she spent the last 10 years of her life in a skilled nursing facility. That speech had a lot of things that were problematic for the people of Michigan. My dad was a federal worker who would have been under attack from Elon Musk in the Department of Defense and would have made the Stryker Brigade combat vehicle less safe. So what I heard was a president who was coming at Michigan and not with our best interests at heart. But my job as governor is going to be to protect, promote, and advance the interests of my state. And I'll do that forcefully. And, you know, sometimes the best defense is a good offense. I'll be ready to take them on as well.
As you looked at Democrats in the various means of protesting during that speech, did you find something that you wanted to applaud and things that made you cringe?
Again, what matters is that the response coming from Michigan that I'll focus on is making sure that the people of Michigan know, one, where the threats are coming from. You know, the threats to those tens of thousands of federal workers here that are doing important work, whether for the National Forest Service or National Park Service, the folks in the Army Corps who are taking care of our Great Lakes. You know, I want to make sure they know we have a government that's allied with them. And that's what I'm going to focus on.
As Lieutenant Governor, you led two statewide task forces, one on racial disparities during COVID, one on jail and pretrial incarceration. Mr. Lieutenant Governor, do you feel that those issues which got prominent attention during COVID and during the Biden administration are not only moving to the back burner, but in many respects might be targets of the Trump administration?
Well, I certainly worked to keep people alive during COVID. I lost 28 people in my life to COVID-19, and people were dying all across the state of Michigan. But of those 23 neighborhood health centers that are the ongoing legacy of that work, more than half of them are in rural communities that are not actually majority people of color. So I think that, you know, if we want to see people alive, if they want to have an administration that wants to focus on people living, then I think they'll focus on supporting those efforts. But I do worry that the Trump administration really has a target on the backs of so many important things we've made progress on in the state of Michigan. I think about those auto suppliers, again, in Metro Detroit, who don't know how to plan for their next quarter because they don't know what's going to happen with this tariff situation and the recklessness and the sloppiness with which it's been proposed and with which it could be implemented. So I think this administration certainly has dangerous things in mind for the state of Michigan, but I'm going to protect them as their governor.
Your mother worked for General Motors. When you hear President Trump say we're going to have more auto plants than ever before and we're going to be wealthier than we've ever been because of tariffs, what do you think or say about that?
The proof's in the pudding. You know, I'm an engineer. I care about the how and to make sure things actually work. And the way these tariffs have been sloppily proposed, I don't have any confidence in this president to be able to deliver on anything he says. I heard a state of the state that had a lot of things that weren't true. But we're going to focus on building real things in Michigan. And again, I'm an engineer. I'm about the truth. I'm about results. I'm about actually getting things done, not just talking trash. And so, you know, I look forward to being able to be the kind of governor who can protect people, but also make progress.
Michigan's Democratic Lieutenant Governor, Garlin Gilchrist. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That does it for today. I will be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.